Just a quick update before today's episode. As you may have noticed, it's been quiet over here for a while. That's because I've been on maternity leave and now have a beautiful daughter at home. It's also because I've focused on hosting some live events the past year and a half, and I'm very happy to be able to share recordings of 3 of those conversations in the upcoming weeks. I'm just in the process of figuring out what combining podcasting and family life may look like. If you want to support this work, you're so welcome to support the podcast on Patreon. So visit patreon.com/forest-of-thought for more information. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. Welcome to the Forest of Thought with me, Ingrid Rieser. Advanced technologies and artificial intelligence are rapidly growing more enmeshed in our lives. How does this affect the deeper realms of consciousness, spirituality, and our relationship to the living world? What are the unfolding human qualities that machines can't acquire, and how might we cultivate them? These are some questions we explore in this live podcast conversation with philosopher Jeremy Naydler.
I felt that the culture that we're in today is not normal. We've fallen away from something which was really a universal consciousness of the sacredness both of nature and of the human spirit. That was the foundation for many thousands of years and across many different cultures. Obviously, there's a question that then comes up, which is, why did this happen?
Jeremy is a gardener and philosopher based in Oxford, England. He has written several books on the experience of the sacred in ancient cultures. In his newer work, he focuses on the fraught relationship between humans and technology as it has developed from ancient times until today, and he explores how we cultivate the human in an era of intelligent machines. This conversation was recorded with an audience at NAV in Stockholm, Sweden in September of 2023, and an unedited and filmed version is also available on YouTube, which I'll link to in the description.
My name is Ingrid, and as many of you know, I host a podcast called The Forest of Thought. And this event is part of a set of events this fall. And the idea was to, in this project, is to explore the idea of life force. What is life? Does it mean to be alive? And how does this animating force that we see expressing itself in us and in all living things, how does it do that? And how can we relate to that in a time where we seem to be in a process of deadening much of the life, both within us and outside of us? And I'm very happy to have Jeremy here with me.
Yep. And I'm very happy to be here.
I think I just wanted to start by saying when I first started reading Jeremy's books, it was several years ago, I was kind of in a state of depression and severe anxiety about the state of the world. And I was really feeling like we humans have really not done a very good job of it all. And even when we try to do something worthwhile, we seem to somehow manage to mess it up. And I think that in reading Jeremy's books, one of the things that this gave me was really an understanding that we have our way of relating to each other and to the natural world has been very different in previous times and previous cultures. Because of the detail into which you explore the inner life of non-modern peoples, it really gave me an understanding of that it can be different. We could possibly, hopefully, be less terrible. And we have the chance to maybe even make something rather beautiful out of our time here. And that was what really, I think, drew me into your work from the beginning. And it was very important at that time for me to be reading that. So you spent many years going very deeply into ancient cultures, their view on, or how they lived their spirituality and consciousness, and how that expressed itself in their way of relating to the world, their way of being in the world. And then you've moved very deeply into exploring how our consciousness and spirituality today is, well, expressing itself in our relationship to advanced technologies, especially. So I wonder if you could start by sharing a little bit about why it was that you sort of made that shift that in one way can seem quite dramatic.
Yes, it almost seems to me that I've lived two different lives in that respect. Although, of course, my interest in technology was running alongside my interest in antiquity. Yeah, the reason I got immersed into the ancient cultures, and it was at first much broader than ancient Egypt, but I homed in on ancient Egypt because there was so much material there, and there was a lot of conflict in Iraq, which was the other center of civilization that I was really interested in, ancient Babylonia. But one couldn't go there without risking one's life. So Egypt was the culture that I focused on. And one of the reasons behind my interest in Egypt was because I felt so alienated in our contemporary culture, and it felt so abnormal in some way, and I was looking for normality. What would a normal human culture be like? And for me, it was a wonderful affirmation to find a culture that was extremely long-lived, must have been going for roughly 3,000 years, if not a bit more. Anyway, it was a highly successful culture. It was, for most of that time, at peace, and it was able to produce most beautiful art, most beautiful artifacts, and the most sublime texts, religious texts, which are very difficult for the modern consciousness to understand. In Egyptology, most Egyptian texts that have survived are regarded as funerary texts, but I felt that no, they're not just funerary texts, they're also initiatory texts. They're to do with, they're describing a mystical experience, an archetypal mystical experience. And in that culture of ancient Egypt, what I found most affirming was the fact that the world was full of gods and goddesses, and so too was the psyche, the Egyptian psyche, very much oriented towards the world of gods and spirits. They were realities. There's no way that one could say they believed in gods and spirits. They experienced them. And to doubt that is really to not see what that culture was about. And they were not in any way unique. In the ancient world, all the cultures were relating primarily to the world of spirit. That was what was regarded as keeping the culture healthy. And Egypt is a very good example of a culture that was extremely healthy, able to survive for a very long time, largely due to the fact that the Egyptian kings were initiates. They had to go through elaborate spiritual rituals in order to become kings, and the priesthood was, I suppose, today it's a little bit difficult to say this, but it was a theocracy. The country was ruled by people not only with an awareness of spirit, but actually in active relationship to the spiritual. Magic, what we call magic, was actually very common. It was a means of keeping the culture safe and prosperous. Now, what was the question that you asked me? Sorry.
Why would you ever leave all of that interesting and fascinating stuff to look at how we relate to modern technologies?
No, I got into it because I felt that the culture that we're in today is not normal. We've fallen away from something which was really a universal consciousness of the sacredness both of nature and of the human spirit. That was the foundation. It was unquestioned foundation for many thousands of years and across many different cultures. That was the reality that people lived in. And that then enabled me to see our own culture in a very different light. And I felt, okay, the question is, why have we become so materialistic today and regard it as completely normal, and are inclined to regard ancient cultures as psychotic, which is unfortunately the way some historians of antiquity regard them. I mean, obviously there's a question that then comes up, which is, why did this happen? What actually happened in history? And for me, the answer is bound up with the question of the evolution of human consciousness. I don't think it's obvious that human consciousness has changed over many hundreds, many thousands of years, and we're all familiar with the biblical story of the fall, but that really applies to a very long historical process of gradual alienation and separation from the world of spirit, which was so real to people in the old days. And in fact, if you read an ancient Roman historian, Plutarch, he wrote a book called The Decline of the Oracles. And when was that? 2nd century AD. And there he was lamenting the fact that the oracles were no longer quite working, not as they used to, that the gods were withdrawing from human awareness. And I think it was in that essay that he describes a Greek traveller going by ship from one place to another. I can't quite remember where it was, in the Aegean somewhere. And they're coming close to an island where it was an island renowned to be populated by a lot of spirits, and all the sailors on this boat heard this great sort of lament coming from this island, and a voice, a kind of spirit voice, shouted out, "Pan is dead." Sent a shiver down people's spines. But they were living at that time of transition where the old way was being lost. So we're talking here about very long process in history and incremental changes over time. We today feel that our culture is normal, has a certain normality about it. Our consciousness is normal, but it's only normal for the last couple of 100 years, and go back 300 or 400 years, and people were thinking and experiencing things in a different way.
In one of your books, you write about that it's not let's see if I have it here. It's not the computer that is responsible for the assault on what it means to be human. It's the assault on what it means to be human that stands behind the development of the computer. And I think it's interesting how you sort of switch there, where we think that these new technologies kind of come at us, and then we're forced to respond to them or adapt to them. But actually, it seems that there is something in our way of thinking, in our culture, in our way of relating to the world that gives rise to these kinds of technologies, which then might perpetuate that same way of thinking that gave rise to them. But what did you mean by that quote? What is it in us then that is?
Yes.
Yeah.
You quoted that to me a few days ago as well. I was trying to think where on earth I wrote. I'm sure I did say that, but
it was in the shadow of the machine, I think.
Yeah.
In the conclusion.
Okay. It was in the conclusion.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was your concluding thought after this many hundred-page book.
Okay. All right. Well, so
I did give you fair warning. I did say, what a great quote, several days ago.
I didn't think you were going to bring it up. Okay. All right. I can handle it. Don't worry.
Okay, good. You sure?
Well, the scientific revolution in the 17th century, it was based upon the view that the human being is basically a machine. And it was because of the strength of the church at that time. Of course, one couldn't deny the human spirit, but the implication, if you read Descartes, is that he was implying that actually we are machines through and through. It's not just the body that's the machine. He reserved a little place in the pineal gland for spirit, but it was a very small place and easily got rid of, which happened not long afterwards with La Mettrie, who wrote this groundbreaking book in the 1740s, I think, called Man a Machine, L'Homme Machine. So that assault on the integrity of the human being as a being of body, soul and spirit, which is how human beings were regarded up until that time, was radical and so destructive of the inner life of human beings. And the scientific revolution was not called a revolution for nothing. It was really turning over the old worldview, which still had a regard for the reality of the spiritual, even if it was not experienced in the intense way that it was experienced in deep antiquity. So, of course, that one sometimes thinks that at least I sometimes think, that the energy with which we have been working towards creating computers that have, they call it human-level intelligence, is almost motivated by the desire to prove that, after all, we are machines, because machines can do everything that we can do.
I mean, yeah, that's certainly the message that we receive a lot of the time, and I think that, although perhaps most of us feel no, that can't be right. I feel like a living, conscious, breathing being that's in relationship to things. I think we can still perhaps doubt that experience because of this pervasive view. So how do we? Are we sure? Perhaps we are these biological machines. And if not, how can we strengthen our sort of own experience of being rather living and ensouled beings?
Yes, we're told this by many scientists and philosophers who are the apologists of the scientific worldview, that we are actually machines, but we don't realize it. And if you read Harari, Yuval Noah Harari, the Israeli historian, he has this view of the human being as a biochemical algorithm. It's extraordinary, really. The thing is, I think we have to, first of all, understand what a machine is. And the classic sort of machine that I think of anyway would be something like a car engine or maybe an old-style clock. The definition of a machine is that it's made up of many individual parts, and each part has its own existence in its own right, which then is put together with other parts that then serve the whole, which is made up of all the different parts. So if you want to find out how the machine works, what you have to do is strip the machine down, take all the parts out and look at how they all interrelate to each other. Then you can put it back together again and you get an understanding of how the machine works. That was how Descartes thought that he could understand the world. But the thing is that organisms aren't like that. Organisms aren't made out of parts which are self-subsistent. If you take an organism apart, then what you're left with is a dead organism. It's not a living organism. So the difference between a machine and an organism is that whereas a machine is a whole that's made up of parts, an organism is parts that are all each made by and infused by this whole, which is on a different level from all the parts. And it actually, you take my fingers and sort of you chop my hand off, then it's not going to survive because it's permeated by this wholeness, which is my body. So the whole actually determines the parts in an organism, and one can see that in the way plants grow, for example. That the whole is already there in the seed. It's already there, and then it manifests itself through the parts. First of all, the little cotyledons, and then the leaves growing, and then the flower buds and the flowers appearing. All of that is a manifestation of the whole through the different parts, and they all belong to it. They can't be separated from it. They're all manifestations of it. Yeah.
It's like there's a great line from a song, which is that it's like dissecting the bird, trying to find the song.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes,
yeah.
Which seems to be what we try often to do in our way of understanding things as parts rather than as relationships. So as we've sort of moved away from seeing the world as peopled by spirits and gods and goddesses, and perhaps become more concerned with reshaping it in our own image, I'm not sure. We've kind of it's interesting because you talk about this lack of connection, this severing of connection that perhaps began then already when Plutarch was writing this in 200 AD, and which we're sort of living in the latest stages of. It's interesting because it seems that we're seeking connection desperately, and that's why we try to create, rather than just finding our way back to that soulful connection with nature or with spirits. We try to create these other connections, like perhaps we have felt previously that everything is connected through an invisible force, and then now we have created Wi-Fi, which is kind of some sort of artificial replacement of that. When previously the world felt, everything in the world felt alive, we are now putting every sensors and everything and calling it the Internet of Things. And I remember I think you have a picture in one of your books of an astronaut floating in space, and it's kind of, where previously the shamans would make journeys to the stars to gain insight and wisdom about the world. Now now we send the astronauts out into space to sort of float around out there. And so we seem to be in a process of creating a kind of counterfeit, so a copy or a fake. I don't know if everyone knows the word counterfeit, but it's like if you have people creating fake money, so it looks like the real thing. But it's an imposter. It's not actually real money, but it's something pretending to be the real thing while it's not. And so we seem to be in this process of creating that, and that becomes very strong in the virtual, because we're creating also a world, and in general creating machines that become more and more adept at imitating life. And it's, what's that about? In a way, why are we, when in a way the living world is right here, and in many ways much more exciting and more, well, it's real, as opposed to the counterfeits. I don't know what you think of that.
Why is the counterfeit world so attractive to people?
Yeah, or what is it that we're doing there in this process? You also said said something about the mystic. Was his name Gerhard Dorn? Already sort of predicted this hundreds of years ago, that we were creating a world, a separate world counter to that of spirit. And in a way, he was prophetic in his predictions of that.
Yeah. I think that maybe I have to take a step back, actually, to try to understand what this process of alienation from the world of spirit, both in nature and that we access inwardly, what that process has really been about, and how one can make sense of it. And the way that I make sense of it is to tell myself that this process has been a necessary process of the human being becoming free from the overpowering influence of the divine world, which was so powerfully experienced in antiquity, that people always had to consult the gods before they did anything. I mentioned the decline of the oracles. Oracles were consulted a lot in especially Babylonia and Greece. They didn't really do it so much in Egypt. They had a more direct line. But human beings did not take responsibility for their lives and their actions in the way that we do today. There was not that sense of an obligation to ourselves to choose freely what we do. Rather, that would have been regarded as impiety in ancient times. And for me, that actually, the claiming of human freedom in relation to the world of spirit is absolutely the central way that I make sense of it, because then we are on our own in a world that seems to be completely devoid of spirit and a totally material world. And today we feel, all of us feel, as individuals, this burden of responsibility for the world that we live in. That this is, it's been really handed over to us now. So that for me seems to be the central development, and with it then goes there's a very strong moral component in how we act in relation to the world and to the planet. But at the same time, it has empowered us to wreak havoc with nature and to bend nature to our own egotistical purposes. The ego is a double-edged blessing, curse, because on the one hand, it gives us this great gift of freedom of choice. On the other hand, we can choose to do really terrible things, which we think are serving ourselves. But in the end, with the development of these technologies which are empowering machines more and more, what we're seeing is a kind of an image of the alienated human being in the machine. I think that it's become, the machine is totally emptied out, it has no soul. And my sense is that human beings, the more we close ourselves off from the life in nature and spirit in nature, the more we turn to the machine as a kind of spiritual substitute and a soul substitute. And it's very, very seductive. It's very alluring. Just the fact that your smartphone and the laptop is backlit. If you go out in nature, it's always so magical when the sun shines, especially in the morning, through dewy leaves and everything sparkles because it's backlit. But that's also, very cunningly been incorporated in the technology that we find so alluring, that we feel comforted by that, the backlit screen. My feeling is that it's incumbent on us, really, to relate to nature on a daily basis and to look after our children, especially when they're so vulnerable to the technology, by introducing them to nature, opening their eyes in wonder to nature, so that they know what is real and what isn't real. They can distinguish between the reality and the counterfeit. If children are educated with the aim of sensitizing them to the life of a little insect that goes through these stages of metamorphosis that insects go through, or a frog with the tadpoles, and plants, how they change when they're so tiny and so vulnerable, and then they put up these leaves. And actually, there's a metamorphosis in many plants. There's a metamorphosis in the leaves before it comes to the flower bud, and then you have the flowers unfolding. These things are miracles. We're surrounded in nature by miracles. That just think of the stars as well at night. There's so much that children should be exposed to a lot, and if they're brought up with computers, then of course they're going to be so confused as to what's real and what's not. So it's a generational thing. As each generation comes into the sphere of an even more clever and all-invasive technology, the human soul is really endangered. And in a way, it's not surprising that so many people feel more comfortable with the counterfeit than with the reality. reality is sometimes cold, sometimes wet, sometimes very hot. Whereas you sit inside with your centrally heated house, you've got a much more comfortable existence.
And maybe this is the part where I ask you this thing about, well, haven't people always felt that way about, new technologies? That they feel more threatening than they really are.
The technologies feel more threatening than
yes. That people like you and me are just skeptical of new technologies because they're new. Just like people were skeptical of the printing press or the cinema or whichever things. Of course, as you've also mentioned, the people who are developing AI at the highest level seem also to be really freaked out and are the ones, in one way, asking to halt the development, to the further development, and some of them at least want a moratorium on the development of certain artificial intelligences, although they also seem at the same time so they seem part of something that they are also at the same time incapable of stopping. So of course it doesn't seem to be just you and me.
No. We've been joined by it seems at least half of the AI research community. I mean, it's incredible. Hundreds of people of people working within AI signed the single sentence statement, which came out in May this year. It was published, and basically it said that humanity risks extinction from artificial intelligence, and this garnered all these signatures from people working within the AI community. Yeah, so we have a lot of Luddites within the artificial intelligence community who are kind of fixated on continuing to develop this extraordinary capacity that artificial intelligence now has, and it seems now to be showing emergent characteristics that weren't programmed into it with the ChatGPT-4. There are now, it's been observed that it's actually able to do things which it wasn't programmed to do. So there is a lot of nervousness within the artificial intelligence community that's being expressed. But of course, I don't think it's stoppable. Maybe some form of regulation will come in eventually, but it'll probably be a bit too late. But meanwhile, it's full steam ahead. Everyone has to carry on developing it. But then the question is, so what are they really serving? And I think that's on the broader question of our relationship to machines. And, shouldn't we just go along with, whatever is being produced? This is the culture that we're in, where, we've got smartphones now, that's fine. So, let's go on to the next stage. But one also has to look, so where is this heading, in fact? And it's been very interesting this year just to see how nervous, actually not just nervous, but fearful, the AI community, if one can refer to them in that way, actually is. Because, where actually is this going? We hear prominent people who've been actually developing neural networks and the whole back propagation system within a neural network, which enables it to learn, enables machines to learn. One of the people who was very prominent in developing that, his name is Jeffrey Hinton, I think, and he resigned from Google just very recently because he was so alarmed, and he wants to give the rest of his life to warning us of where this is going. But what they're afraid of is that humanity will become outsmarted by the machines. And there is this idea that, which I mentioned earlier, of human-level intelligence, that the machines are approaching now so-called human-level intelligence, and will soon supposedly surpass it. So there's a whole question as to really what is intelligence, and actually I'm not sure at all about this idea of equating human intelligence and machine intelligence. I don't think they're the same sort of intelligence. And a lot of people who have been speaking about this from within the AI community are also saying this is not a human intelligence, it's an alien intelligence. It's almost as if we've summoned this kind of alien being into existence. And we don't know what it's going to do, and we don't think we can control it anymore. It's got to that point now where they don't quite understand what's going on inside the neural networks, and because of that, they don't know how to control it. So then we have to come back to ourselves and really see how do we differ from machines, and how can we sustain and develop that which is human within us in relation to the machine.
Yeah, and I think, just to add to that, I think that like you said, AI researchers seem to have, or people working on this seem to have brought something into existence that they then feel like a power that they feel unable to rid themselves of, or to. It's sort of like, yeah, letting the genie out of the box, as you said yesterday. I do think that many people or AI researchers warning about these things often think about maybe the existential threats, such as our information systems going down, or AI being used by in various nefarious ways by governments, or in wars, or by people who want to wreak havoc, etc., etc. And now that our world is so much, the functioning of things is so much dependent on these systems, of course we become very vulnerable to that. But I think that something that we've talked about is this thing that you just mentioned, that as we become more enmeshed in those systems, we risk becoming more machine-like. And someone like Elon Musk will say, well, that's why we need to get these neural implants, so that we can keep pace with the machines. And that's where this fallacy comes in, that, well, actually, the ability to do more calculations per second isn't actually the same as intelligence. So, but do you want to say something more about what you just concluded previously, that we have to look at, well, how is human intelligence then different from machine intelligence? How do we cultivate the human in the face of this?
I think I'd take it on the three different levels, and first of all, I think we need to really understand and experience our connection with nature by going out into nature, having a living relationship to nature on a daily basis. However that's done, if you just to look at the sky, or if you're lucky enough to have a garden to work in the garden and relate to the plants in the garden, or to go for walks in parks or in the mountains or whatever. That relationship to nature, then that's the basis on the sort of physical level in a way. But we also have souls, and for that, the relationship with other people, friendships, to be connected with our own inner life of creative impulses, inspirations, and with our own dream life, with our own unconscious. You see, these are things like the computer doesn't know anything about nature. It doesn't have any relationship to nature. It doesn't have any inner life either. It doesn't dream. Computers don't dream. But dreams are such a potent source of wisdom for us and inner connection. Computers don't have friendships. These are human things that we really need to develop and, hold precious. But then on the spiritual level, we have to make space for that time of quietness and inner retreat, time for meditation and contemplation and prayer, just to come back to our own centers, because we're so pulled out all over the place. Just when you might feel that twitching urge to check your iPhone, it's always good to stop and just pull back, and I think to make a regular space each day, whether it's just for 20 minutes or half an hour in the morning or in the evening or both, of silent contemplation or meditation. These, again, it's something that the computer doesn't know anything about, because, as you said, what it's doing is, what computers do is calculate. That they're working with this the measure of the intelligence of a computer is in calculations per second, and so the most highly intelligent computer will do literally billions of calculations per second. It's ridiculous. Of course we can't possibly match that. That is the alien intelligence. But the truly human intelligence is the intelligence of the heart, when you slow the mind down to 0 calculations per second, which is when the computer would turn off. Then you come to your humanity. And that's what one has. It's called in the Orthodox tradition the leading the mind into the heart, and then you have the possibility of strengthening what's truly human in relation to the machine, and let them outsmart us. So fine, you could get into trillions of calculations per second. I don't care. But so long as you don't destroy the world in the process. But the important thing is that we come back to ourselves and know who we are as human beings of body, soul, and spirit.
Is that a good place to take a break?
Yes.
Go grab a drink and have a chat, and even better to have a chat with someone you haven't chatted to before. And then we'll reconvene in a little while and see what comes up.
Hi, thank you so much for the discussion, and I hope I'm not being too loud. I myself is an AI researcher, and in my teaching and research environment, I encounter a different discourse or narrative. People are more excited about AI. People are very excited about what the technology, the new opportunities that will bring, say maybe to teaching. At the same time, there is also, I can say, somewhat a defeatist attitude toward the technology, and there is a sense of powerlessness toward the progress. An example, a very recent example, I would say, is ChatGPT. When my university released recently guidelines on how we can use ChatGPT. And essentially, I don't know how exactly it's phrased in the document, but in short, my impression is that ChatGPT is here to stay, so we have to deal with it. So my question to you is that there are these multiple narratives or discourse on AI. And I guess they will exist in parallel, right? Then how will different discourses drive the development of AI then? If that makes sense. Thank you.
That's a very interesting question. And the thought that comes to me in response to that is the question, who or what are you serving when you're developing this technology? That's a question which I think is the one that got those researchers who signed the open letter and the following single sentence statement a couple of months later. That's the question that I think came into their minds, that maybe we have been serving something anti-human, and which could have serious consequences for humanity. And whatever it is that one's doing in one's work, I think that question we have to answer for ourselves. Who are we serving, or what are we serving in the work that we're doing? It may be that those researchers who are really excited about AI do feel that they're serving the greater good of humanity. And let's hope they're right. But it comes back to each person to ask that question of themselves. And yeah, I read a couple of articles by journalists in the New York Times, working for the New York Times, who both had spent quite a lot of time in Silicon Valley and sort of trying to get a feel of what was going on there in the minds of the people. And they gave the impression that really of this rubbing the Aladdin's lamp, this sort of picture of not really quite knowing what was going to come up. That you develop this technology and you don't really know what genie is going to appear, and you just hope for the best. But that's not a very good basis for doing it, in my view.
Thank you so much for your talk. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on like, is it possible to understand the essence of a technology, but without referring to modernity's self-understanding? It's like in the modern understanding, AI is just like, electricity, voltage through logic gates. But in a non-modern understanding, where the world is alive and imbued with spirit, in that kind of perspective, what are we actually building, and what is technology then?
I think you have to to judge it by its effects. Can one say that the technology gives us a closer relationship to the world of spirit? Do certain technologies perhaps give us a greater awareness of the world of spirit? Or, on the contrary, do they tend to cut us off even more? For me, and I can only really speak personally, I feel that the world of nature gives me far more, infinitely more access to spirit than the computer does. And in fact, I feel drawn away from it when I'm sitting in front of my computer. But then there are lots of other aspects to modern technology than just sitting in front of a computer or consulting a smartphone. But we have to judge that each ourselves, I think. I'm aware of the distractive capability of especially smartphones, the handheld computer, which so very easily takes us away from the connection with inwardness, our own inner connection to our souls, and what's going on within us. Instead of going there, let's just check the smartphone. It's as I experience it and sense its effects, it tends to take us away from a direct awareness, which is what I seek. But it may be very different for other people.
I was thinking about something you wrote, Jeremy, about how in modern technologies we've have combined electricity and logic, as you were sort of also saying, and that electricity previously, or how electricity previously manifested itself, was very much in the realm of the gods. And so the lightning or it could be said, as you've said, it kind of belonged to the underworld in some way, but certainly very, very powerful forces. And that also that logic was something that generally didn't have anything to do with the important things in life. And it's more of that it doesn't have any content in a way. It's a system. So my feeling would be that non-modern peoples would probably think we were playing a very dangerous game with these forces that we don't quite understand, perhaps. And I mean, the electricity that runs here, it feels very maybe innocuous or something. But maybe when it comes to that and to other many other things as well, maybe all things have a kind of spiritual quality or an inner quality that we are not so often aware of. So maybe they think we were being very reckless. I don't know, perhaps.
You want me to?
Yeah, if you want to add anything, that's what I've taken from other things in our conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting that of course, in antiquity, they did have a view on lightning, and which is the manifestation of electricity within nature. And for example, in ancient Greek theology, mythology, there were two aspects to Zeus. He was this great sort of cosmic god but there was a chthonic aspect to him, and as the thunderer and with the lightning bolt, this was more the underworld Zeus that was manifesting rather than the heavenly Zeus. So these two aspects of Zeus were recognized in the religion. So I think there was an awareness that electricity came from a different region, and in a hierarchical worldview where the heavens represent the sort of the spiritual realm of the gods, and the earth is more the underworld. That strikes me as being a very interesting manifestation of that worldview. But with logic, I was fascinated to find that in the medieval world, when logic was one of the 7 liberal arts, so it was studied in the cathedral schools and then in the universities, it was represented in the manuscripts and also in certain sculptures as a dragon. It's so interesting to see that. And sometimes this dragon was shown to be, you'd see a picture of Logica, with a long sleeve. And the dragon would be just up her sleeve. You just see a couple of claws and this sort of face appearing from under the sleeve. So that was, they had a kind of a deep ambivalence towards logic and its provenance, where it came from.
Yes, thank you for your talk. Very interesting. I just wanted to ask a question, not that I really know anything about it myself, but there are also other people talking about archons as an entity of wanting to, or having an intent of robbing the humans of their humanity, kind of a question. So do you have any opinions about that?
And maybe say something about archons for those who don't know.
Oh, me say something about archons, all right, okay.
I certainly can't say anything about them.
Yeah, no, well, I know that there was a book that came out very recently, and I haven't read it, and I can't even remember the title, but this is part of Gnostic mythology. The archons are I suppose one might say that the sort of evil spirits who try to keep humanity away from the true spiritual, our true spiritual home, if you like. And I would certainly go along with the idea that there are adversarial powers who are at work, who would whose intention, one might say, is to constrain humanity so that we do not develop towards real spiritual awareness and eventually a union with the divine world, which, of course, is the ultimate end. And most religions express it. They express it in different ways, but But the goal of all of this historical, one might say mess, but the historical process is, in the end, the transformation, the spiritual transformation of the human being and of also of nature, but a spiritual transformation, not a material transformation, which is so destructive, which is what we're witnessing now, but through the power of love, through a loving attentiveness to the natural world, to bring about a kind of an uplifting of nature towards the divine. This is something that one can experience oneself to a very limited degree when one really pays I would say reverent attention to nature. That one feels that actually our human consciousness has a gift to bring to nature, and it does seem to me very, very likely, in fact, almost definite, that there are spiritual powers who seek to prevent us from developing in this way, and would prefer to bind us to a purely materialistic worldview, and actually create a technosphere, which is a term which I find probably the best term to describe the world that's coming into being, a technosphere, which binds us into this soulless form of existence in which we don't develop our spiritual potential, and we also transform nature negatively into a kind of technological hell. So yeah, the archons, I'm not sure about. I mean, it's a good enough term, but I'm not sure if we should. Not having read the book, I can't really say exactly what this particular author is wanting to say, but certainly I think there are adversary powers which we should be aware of, and which we need to counterbalance.
Thank you so much for your conversation. I struggled the whole evening with something that I find really difficult to express, but I give it a try. And that is something about that I feel that there's it's kind of dichotomous. Like, I obviously also feel, or like, I really seek being in nature and worshipping that relationship. And then I'm also kind of in working as an educator in technology, and I'm kind of wondering what to do. I'm tempted to leave, and then I feel like, well, but maybe I could do something to help with relationships. And then I feel like I can't convince people to just go to nature, because, I mean, where to go from here, from this state, from this world, from this technical world, where people invest and are part of developing technologies. There must be more than relationship to nature also, or could we imagine a relationship to technology and kind of coming to learn to live with technology in a more perhaps more caring, also caring about technology? Couldn't we imagine a relationship to technology also to develop a relationship to nature, to not just see technology as evil. So I don't know what the question could be, but where to go from here, given the fact that we are living in this technical world.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to accept that technology is here. We can't just wish it away, but because it's here, we have to form a relationship to it. First of all, in which we are free in our relationship to it, and we're not addicted. That's crucial. And in education, that should be a key part of it. How to teach children how to maintain their independence, to be able to put the thing down or to turn the thing off. And that's a real educational challenge, I would say, today, to be able to instill in the child, in the young adult, a genuine independence in relation to the technology. And the reason why that's so important is because then it becomes possible to make sure that the technology is serving your purposes, your intentions, rather than you succumbing to the intentions of the corporation, whatever it is, that's trying to seduce you into spending hours and hours and hours on the machine and robbing your soul, really, to give them profit. So I think it sounds to me like I think it's very important that we recognize that we need to be more educated in relationship to it, and then I'm sure it can, of course, it can be turned to good, because it's not intrinsically evil. It's how it's used and how it uses us, and if we allow it to use us. But so long as it serves, we can make it serve genuinely human ends, which are not the ends of corporations, and it's not to do with making money, but actually to help us become better human beings and to do things that we want to do, then I don't see that's an issue. It's really just to do with this balance between our ability to actually use it in the right way and not be used by it.
If I can add, I'm also thinking that, it's important to realize that interactions between humans is also an interaction with nature, of course, too. So having a real honest conversation in a meaningful way, for me, that is also giving some of that same quality for me anyway. And I think it would be a very interesting. I think that we can develop. I agreed with everything that Jeremy said, that it's about how we develop our relationship to those technologies, but also that I think we could develop technologies that are much more aligned, that help us perhaps more bring out our human qualities, rather than constantly sort of shutting them down. So that would be a good challenge for your students at the university, I think. What would it mean to develop technologies with an awareness of spirit, for example? You don't have to use those words, but I'm sure you can think of a clever way of putting the challenge to them.
It feels, listening to you, like we should go back in our connection with nature, and maybe to be able to go forwards in our application of technology, to reach the sustainable society that we're aiming for. I mean, because we want these grand solutions. We see we're in this urgent, flaming world that we need to. There's all these challenges, and we have so short time. We want to find the big solutions that are going to solve it all really quickly. And we're in our compasses are like spinning. We don't really know what to do. So I feel like we need to kind of train our compasses somehow. If that's my question, how to train our compasses. Could you give me 2 or 3 favorite movements that you would like we could start small, that we could start really small, and that could maybe be that we could scale?
This sort of gathering is very, very positive, I think. We get together and we discuss these things. It's very important that we do that. I think it's a wonderful evening, really, to be able to just together consider these things. But yeah, I don't regard relating to nature and as going back, really. I think it can also be a going forward too, and because it's a form of community building as well. I've said it already, really. I just repeat that I think it's terribly important that we give ourselves. You talk about us all being in a spin. That we get ourselves out of the spin and just calm down and experience stillness, and then we come back to ourselves, and that's the best place from which to then deal with whatever problems there are out, that we're faced with the world, and that's on a daily basis. We need to keep coming back to the still center within us, and then, then we can stand in the world in the right way, and we can stand in relationship to the technological challenges that we face in a way that we feel in contact with our own humanity, and I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you, everyone, so much for being here, and thank you especially to Jeremy, and also his partner Luann, who I've had the pleasure of spending the last few days with.
As mentioned, an unedited and filmed version of this talk is available on YouTube. I'll link to that in the description below. This episode was supported by the Veriditas Foundation and produced in collaboration with NAV Sweden. Thank you so much to them, and thank you for listening. I'll be back in a few weeks with the next episode. Take care.